Hello, it's a pleasant Friday here in Korea. Welcome to this edition of Arirang News. I'm Kwon Jang-ho, and thank you for joining us. Talk of a trade war between the US and China has subsided somewhat in the last few days, but it's still bubbling under the surface. There are still some nerves in South Korea over the repercussions it could have on the local economy, especially as the timing comes while renegotiations of the free trade agreement with the US are still ongoing. Add to the mix the North Korea summits, which Trump has said could also affect the negotiations. We'll sit down with an expert to break down these issues a bit further, but first let's bring you the latest stories that we're following here at this hour with Devin waiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. Yes, it's exactly now 2 weeks until the two Koreas meet in their highly anticipated summit, and South Korea's presidential office has confirmed that another preparatory meeting between working-level officials from both sides will take place early next week. They'll continue negotiating details of protocol, security, communication, and media coverage for the summit, which is on April 27th. A senior Blue House official confirmed the meeting this morning, but did not disclose the exact date. He also confirmed another meeting next week, this one of high-level officials. It's expected to take place on Wednesday. And as the U.S. and North Korea negotiate a roadmap to denuclearization, the same official said South Korea has its own solution, but did not elaborate. The United States is also getting ready for its summit with North Korea. President Trump's pick for Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, had his Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday. He told senators that he does not plan to loosen the sanctions on Pyongyang until the North takes concrete steps toward denuclearization. But he added he's hopeful that can be achieved peacefully. Lee Ji-won has more.
Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo said North Korea should not expect rewards from talks with the United States until steps toward irreversible denuclearization are taken. At his Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday, Pompeo, who is currently serving as CIA director, said President Trump and his administration will make sure not to repeat past mistakes regarding North Korea, suggesting Washington will maintain maximum pressure and sanctions.
We have a responsibility to achieve a condition where Kim Jong-un is unable to threaten the United States of America with a nuclear weapon.
He added that he's not optimistic that Pyongyang will agree to dismantle its nuclear program, and that in the past negotiations, the U.S. and the world had eased sanctions too quickly. Pompeo also went on to say that if the U.S. was under direct threat from the North, Washington would take a response that moved past diplomacy. However, unlike what many had widely viewed before, Pompeo said he's not advocating for regime change. He added that while Pyongyang's denuclearization is a tall order, he's hopeful President Trump can achieve it through sound diplomacy. On the same day, President Trump spoke to governors and lawmakers on the pre-summit developments, which are coming thick and fast.
Meetings are being set up right now between myself and Kim Jong-un, who will be, I think it'll be terrific. I think we'll go in with a lot of respect, and we'll see what happens.
He also heaped praise on China for helping the U.S. setting up the summit. The leaders of North Korea and the U.S. are to have their historic first-ever bilateral summit in May or early June. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
This week has seen a flurry of political events in North Korea. Its ruling party held a Politburo meeting, and the regime's legislature held its annual meeting. The regime also celebrated 6 years of Kim Jong-un's leadership. But unlike past years, there was one thing that was not publicly mentioned at all: nuclear power. Oh Jung-hee tells us why.
With only 2 weeks left until the Inter-Korean Summit and much progress being made toward the first-ever U.S.-North Korea summit, Pyongyang's making no mention of its nuclear power in its major meetings or announcements. Throughout this week, North Korea has held a Politburo meeting of its ruling Workers' Party and a parliamentary meeting that's usually held once a year, and celebrated the 6th anniversary of Kim Jong-un assuming the top post. But these differed greatly from previous years. The regime often hailed Kim Jong-un's leadership by saying he had developed North Korea as a strong nuclear-armed state. But this year, Pyongyang rather said it was able to, quote, manifest its strategic position with Kim's leadership. The same goes for the Supreme People's Assembly meeting on Wednesday. At the same meeting in 2012, the North stipulated in its constitution that it's a nuclear state, and in the following year adopted a law codifying its possession of nuclear weapons for self-defense. But the focus of this year's parliamentary meeting was its 5-year economic development plan. It even seemed as if the regime did not want to put much weight on the event, with Kim Jong-un not attending it. He has missed only 2 sessions out of 8 before the one on Wednesday. South Korea's Unification Ministry says it's paying close attention to why the regime refrained from calling itself a strong nuclear state, but it says this could be in view of ongoing efforts for denuclearization and peace on the Korean peninsula. 오정희, Arirang News.
And now we're going to take a look back at a critical chapter in Korea's history that unfolded in a foreign land. Our Cha Sang-mi tells us about Korea's provisional government established 99 years ago in Shanghai when Korea was under Japanese colonial rule. Its goal was to one day lead an independent nation.
On March 1, 1919, after months of nationwide protests against Japan's ruthless colonial rule, Koreans declared their country free and independent. With the March 1st movement as a catalyst, Korean independence activists in Shanghai established a provisional government in April the same year, 9 years after Japan forcefully annexed Korea in 1910.
There are at least 8 provisional Korean governments in various regions, both domestically and abroad, among which there were 3 main ones, namely the government in Shanghai, the Hansung government based in Seoul, and the National Council of Korea based in Vladivostok, Russia.
The provisional governments in Korea and Russia were watched closely by Japan, which worked to limit their activity. That prompted the decision in September 1919 to join the 3 main ones together in Shanghai. Experts say the Chinese city was chosen for geopolitical reasons.
Shanghai was an ideal place for the establishment of the provisional government because it was an international city, a commercial and diplomatic hub. Also, it was governed by France at the time, which helped the independence activists carry on their movement of Japan's immediate sight.
13 years passed in Shanghai, but the provisional government had to keep moving to different Chinese cities like Changsha and Guangzhou to evade the constant threat of discovery and the Sino-Japanese War. The final destination was Chongqing, where they stayed till November 1945. The provisional government elected Lee Seung-man as its first president in 1919. An independence activist with a PhD from the United States, he later became the first president of South Korea in 1948. The last president of the provisional government was nationalist Kim Gu, who thought the only way to take back Korea was through armed force. After the independence was won, Kim Gu fought against the country's looming division until he was assassinated in 1949. Experts say the legacy of the provisional government is the liberal democracy South Korea has today. It paved the way to self-rule for Korea and its people.
9 years after the fall of the Korean Empire and its monarchy in August 1910, the provisional government was proclaimed. And in 1948, the South Korean Constitutional Assembly held on to the principles of the provisional government, which remain in place to this day.
South Korea also owes its official name to the provisional government, the Republic of Korea. Its national anthem, 애국가, also comes from the same period. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's central bank has released its preliminary data on the nation's export and import prices for March. The local currency's been strengthening against the dollar, so exports fetched lower prices, but the price of imports rose. Kim Hae-sung reports.
Export prices are down, import prices up for March compared to the previous month. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, export prices dropped 0.9% on month to 84.27 on the export price index on the back of a stronger Korean won. The local currency gained 0.7% on month against the greenback in March, averaging 1,071.891 to the US dollar over the 1-month period. Export prices of electronic goods fell 1.4% on month in March, and chemical goods export prices dropped by nearly 1%. But import prices rose for 3 consecutive months, up 0.5% on month to record 83.94 despite the won's appreciation and steady oil prices. The price of Dubai crude was $62.74 a barrel in March, similar to February's $62.72 a barrel.
Import prices in March increased slightly on month, mainly due to soaring electrode prices, which went up near fivefold on increasing demand from China, as the country is using the material to produce electric furnaces that are more eco-friendly.
The BOK said import prices of raw materials, capital goods, and consumer goods all fell, and that excluding electrode prices would result in a drop in import prices. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Thursday that trade negotiations with China are in progress. This will likely further alleviate market concerns after recent comments by Washington and Beijing had threatened the possibility of an all-out trade war between the two sides. Kim Mo-gyun has more.
Speaking to reporters at the White House on Thursday local time, U.S. President Donald Trump said that trade negotiations with China are making smooth progress, adding that he thinks Beijing will treat Washington very fairly by possibly taking down some of its trade barriers.
So we have the kind of a relationship that I think is going to be very aggressively sustained. Yesterday, as you know, President Xi made a very good speech, and he said he's going to open up China. He's going to open it up, take down a lot of the trade barriers, maybe all of them.
The remarks come as the world's two largest economies have been showing signs of moving towards a trade war since early March, when President Trump imposed tariffs of 25% on Chinese steel and 10% on aluminum. Following this, Beijing hit back, imposing 25% duties on 8 American goods categories, including pork and recycled aluminum, tariffs in total worth $3 billion. Yet, the U.S. China trade tensions have been somewhat alleviated since Chinese President Xi Jinping expressed his wish to achieve peaceful development with win-win results at the Boao Forum for Asia. Meanwhile, from South Korea's perspective, the Bank of Korea said that the trade dispute between the United States and China is not likely to affect the South Korean economy too much in the short run. According to its report released on Thursday, the BOK projected the short-term effects to be weak, but added that if the trade discord gets prolonged, or if the two sides actually decide to impose customs levies on each other, there is a chance that the damage to the Korean economy would increase. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Now, to help us break down this trade dispute between the two superpowers and how it could affect Korea, we have with us Professor Shin Sang-yeop from Kyung University. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, let's start with the Bank of Korea's report, which our reporter just mentioned just now. If I look at here, it said that the short-term influence of the trade dispute between US and China will be minimal, but if it is prolonged, the damage to the Korean economy could be bigger. Now, do you agree with this? And, what are the possible damages if the dispute does go on?
Well, I think I do fully agree with this analysis because, as we know very well, USA imposed the 25% tariffs on 1,333 items imported from China. Actually, the export was worth of the $50 billion one. And in response to the measures taken by the USA, China also took some retaliatory action. They announced that they would impose 25% tariffs on the 106 items of the American items. So certainly the trade war seems to be in progress. And if this situation prolonged, well, definitely, according to the Bank of Korea, at the moment, on a short-term basis, the negative impacts on the South Korean economy caused by the trade war between USA and China could be very minimal. But if the situation prolonged, I think the damages could be more serious because this time, out of total, the items of products imposed by both sides, the USA and China imposed 25% tariffs. Not many Korean items were included. That means that directly or indirectly, we could get the negative impact, but it could not be very serious. But if the situation goes on, then they could That means that USA and China could impose more tariffs on more items of products. Then the South Korean main exporting items could be included on those kind of the items. That means we could gain more serious damages on our exports. Considering the importance of the China and USA as major trading partners, definitely when they impose the more tariffs on more items of products, subsequently the Korean items could be included on those items. And certainly there could be a more serious negative impacts on the Korean economy. And the second one is then they could increase the tariff rates. At the moment they impose the 25% tariff rates on the imported items from each other, then they could increase the tariff rates. As we know very well, very recently the USA even considered imposing 75% tariffs on imported steel products from China and aluminum products, something like that. So definitely there could be some possibility of increasing tariff rates on each other. That could be also negative factors on the Korean economy as well.
You're saying they are potentially factors, but for now, I mean, it seems right now that an all-out trade war isn't yet on the cards.
No.
But is there a possibility that there could be an all-out trade war? What do you reckon?
I think there must be a possibility, but of course, we have a very valuable lessons from World War II. Before outbreak of the World War II, we did not have the GATT or WTO. That means that the countries around the world did not have any chance to share their opinions about our economic situations and the economic policies of member countries took. But after the World War II, many countries, led by particularly with the strong initiatives of USA, they decide to establish the GATT, right now the WTO. Why they have, what kind of role the WTO has? That means that they get it together. If any member country goes too far, so because of that, if they break down the world trading system, definitely the other countries try to do something to prevent them from doing such a kind of things. Of course, the China and USA are the big economies in the world, so it could not be very easy for other countries to change their policies. But I think because of the lessons we got from the World War II, definitely other countries will not sit idle. They will do something, and then the USA and China will face some heavy pressures from the global community. And then secondly, practically, if they continue to take this stance, it could not be good for their own national economies. So definitely, I think the possibility exists. Possibility of the trade war between two countries exists. But I think there are more possibility that these two countries stop these kind of policies, which can hurt each other's economy and then hurt the global economy, I think.
Well, the fact that you say don't think it's likely does sound encouraging, but the fact that you talk about World War II is perhaps a little worrying.
Because that, if I had some more explanation, when we did not have the GATT system, which dealt with the global trade issues, at the time, because of the devaluation policy taken by the many countries in Europe, at the time Europe was center of the global economy, or because of the competitive devaluation policy, there was inflation. Inflation resulted in the deadlock of international trade. So out of sight, out of mind, So under such a kind of situation, if something happened, they did not have any way to resolve those kind of problems. Because of this, the lesson which the global community got from the global economy, they established the GATT system. That means that we did not want to repeat the same mistakes. So definitely the USA and China, they put the first priority on the national interests, but they could not avoid such a kind of some invisible and huge pressure from the global community.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, let me bring it back to South Korea for now. So, of course, all this is happening while South Korea and the US are in the middle of renegotiations over their free trade agreement. Now, there still seem to be renegotiating, but there are different comments coming out from the Blue House and the White House. The President Moon Jae-in is saying that a deal has been reached, but President Trump is saying that negotiations are still ongoing, that they're close, but they're still ongoing. What do you make of the two differing statements?
Well, there could be several interpretations we can make, but if I tell you two interpretations which many experts agreed on. First one is that, in the coming November, there will be a midterm election in the United States. And then Mr. Trump, actually, he has taken so-called American first policy. And he said that he said he has done everything to keep the American national interests. Well, definitely by asking some more things to Korea, that means the negotiation is going on to have the, revise the Korea-USA FTA. Definitely, he could exaggerate more his efforts and his government devotion to keep the American national interests. And the second one is definitely, I think as we discussed before, USA has, contacted with China because to reduce the huge trade deficit in the trade with China, and to maximize the effects in the trade negotiation with China. USA seems to need the support from other trading partners. In this context, Korea could be one of the very important trading partners for USA to take the advantages in the negotiation with China to adjust the trade relations between two countries.
Before we go, let me just talk about one point that I mentioned earlier. Trump has thrown into the mix in these negotiations that he will hold up negotiations on the agreement until a deal is made with North Korea. I think that it's a very strong card to negotiate with South Korea. There hasn't been that much mention of it since, but could Trump really tie up the FTA negotiations with the North Korea summits?
Who knows, but I think as I already explained, strategically, well, the USA seems to use the renegotiation for Korea-US FTA, by using the North Korean card. Because, as we know very well, there has been some slight differences on the stance toward the summit meeting with the North Korea between USA government and Korean government. If I tell you more details about it, the Korean government seems to put the first priority on the peaceful or dialogue with North Korea to solve the North Korean nuclear crisis issues. How about the USA? USA government has put more priorities on the so-called the denuclearization of North Korea as a kind of some prerequisite for the successful summit meeting between USA and the North Korean leaders. So by having this stance regarding the renegotiation for Korea-US FTA, maybe USA could change the South Republic of Korea's stance on the summit meeting with the North Korea to some degree. So by having changing this, the Korean government, particularly President Moon's the policy or stance toward the summit meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which is similar to the American the stance. They want to increase the possibility of the successful outcomes at the summit meeting between USA President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, I think.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But thank you for coming in, Professor Shin, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us. And
my pleasure.
You can come in again.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of our programme, but make sure to stay tuned to Arirang News for more domestic and global news updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon. Goodbye.
2000, the first Inter-Korean Summit. The leaders of South and North Korea meet for the first time since Korea's division. The inter-Korean exchanges begin in earnest. Year 2007, the second Inter-Korean Summit. The two Koreas announced a joint declaration to promote economic cooperation.
The leaders of the two Koreas.
And now, two Koreas to hold 2018 Inter-Korean Summit on April 27. A momentum for denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula and the development of inter-Korean relations. 2018 Inter-Korean Summit.
South and North Korea are stronger when we are together. The historic moments and the wave of peace created by one Korea stunned the world. The melody of hope sung together, and the energetic reconciliation brought the spring of peace to the